Okay, so I just start the discussion. I didn't send you like a preview of this question, and I've been kind of thinking about how to get started. So the way that this will work, I will just ask a question, and I think I'm gonna ask you to answer in the order that you presented. So Patricia first, then Bay, and then Nihar, and then you can, if you have reactions, you can react to the answers. And I will just open to also the students if they want to ask questions, and just keep this lively discussion as lively as possible. All right. So my question is, I mean, we see from Nihar and Bay, I think there is a huge opportunity to apply automation to a lot of the things that happen in science. On Monday and Tuesday, which was yesterday, we had presentations about some issues with data, and this touches on what Patricia does. Like basically historical data that we have for studying science has these biases, right? So and Patricia has been like observing this herself, like she's been tracking the metadata. So in the past we just tracked papers, but now we're tracking data sets. So I guess there is this conflict between, okay, we could automate lots of things that are hard in science, but also we should be careful about the data that we use to learn how to automate that or optimize. So what do you think the role of automation is? I guess that's my question. What do you think the role of automation is in science? And what do you think the role of human curation is as well? Like, where should the bar be? How should we let more automation take place, like reject papers automatically, or like reject submissions to Crossref because they're of low quality? That will be one extreme, or the other extreme will be no, we have too much automation. CVPR is a mess. Everybody tweets about how crazy the reviews are. We should have more humans making more careful assignments. So where do you think the bar is in these two extremes? So Patricia, let's start with you.
Yeah, that's a big question. I think for what I do with Crossref metadata, most of what we're focused on is making metadata machine actionable. And that, I think the purpose of that is not to make sure everything is done by machines. I think it's to make sure the jobs that need to be done by people are much easier. So for example, we could collect ORCID IDs in our metadata records, and we have this, it's a small but persistent problem with publishers supplying the wrong ORCID IDs, because it's either human error or they've done some kind of automation on their end that's supplying the wrong ID. And often that's not uncovered until we try to push the wrong metadata record to someone's ORCID profile, and they say, hey, I didn't have anything to do with this. What are you doing? So I feel like at this point, there's definitely a need for human curation of science and analysis, but there's also a lot that can be done with making metadata machine actionable. And I almost think like it's still too early days to really, for me personally, to define that line, not being an expert. But I really see there's a lot more we can do with just making the role of the people easier, so they can just maybe look at a screen and say, okay, this works, this doesn't, as opposed to going through 27 steps to make sure something works or doesn't.
So,
yeah, so yeah, it's a big question. I'm thinking that maybe there'll be co-evolution between human behavior and also using algorithms. Because one thing I'm thinking is NIH has this Litecoin projects. They want to develop a platform that I believe is some sort of making researchers to submit like a short assertions in addition to like long papers to describe key elements of a study. And then that way, I think I think that probably would have similar effort would have some impact on how studies are reported in scientific literature. Would there be other formats, or would there still be papers like in the traditional format? So that's one thing. The other thought I have is content-based matching, because my own experience at the ACL system is we used the bidding for many years and then switched to content-based matching, and I wasn't happy that I had to really manually go through my Semantic Scholar pages to clean up everything, because they cannot do good authorship disambiguation, and you know, like your profile is mixed up with others, so you have to do the human labor. But once that's done, I can see that my review assignments get so much better. So I really like that, because all of my papers now gets compared with submissions. So the relevance just goes straight up. So I was really happy about that. But then ACL roll out the ARR system. So like you submit, you can submit every month, get feedback, review, and then for each conference, you decide which conference to go, and they can kind of create a collection of accepted papers. And then the ARR sort of, I think there's a trouble that because every month there are different submissions instead of like one whole batch. So the matching has some problem there. So it's not, I wouldn't say I don't know if other people have experience about the typical, so like a Nihar's algorithm, when it goes to the ARR mode, how does that work, and what changes would it you might see? So yeah, so these are the two things that I can think of right now.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and you know, we can talk offline about ARR. I'm not in that community, so I don't have an experience with the rolling review, but that's something awesome to talk about. But more generally for Daniel's question, yes, like as Bay was referring to, there's a lot of semi-automation which is already happening, and because of scale, it was kind of inevitable, right? So in like things that our community has been working on and are actually used in practice. For example, for some sort of assignment of reviewers to papers, and for mitigating subjectivity, for handling issues of some sort of dishonesties and so on. And many of these are semi-automated. That is, you do need human intervention as well currently. Without human intervention, they're not working very well. We're getting there, but not yet. Now, that said, as some of you might know, like there are some other communities which are also using automation for other things, like things as simple as checking of formatting of the paper, or more nuanced, like, hey, is the statistical analysis correct, right? Are the effect sizes and the p-values that are reported consistent with each other? Right? Have they done a Bonferroni correction for multiple testing? Things of that sort. There are toolboxes to check for that as well. And on the other extreme, people have also tried to design AI reviewers. Yeah. I know at least 3 or 4 papers on that. So like you give it a paper and it will give you a review and give a decision, accept or reject. And in my opinion, they're not at all like suitable for practical use at this point. And the fun thing is that people who designed those algorithms submitted the paper that they wrote about the algorithm to that algorithm. And in every case, the algorithm rejected that paper. So, but that's a bit more tongue-in-cheek. But in general, yeah, I haven't seen it working very well. And I don't think it's useful for that purpose. And we're quite far. So currently, use of AI is very good for semi-automation. We're taking various modules and trying to automate them. And we are doing better and better and better each passing day.
So any reactions about each other's points? You have or the audience? Okay, so the other thing is that I see that a lot of the stuff that Bay and Nihar is doing are about data is kind of hard to get. Like I saw in Bay's, like there is a lot of work in getting the data, in matching news with scientific articles. And Nihar, I don't think there is a data set on reviews, right? On like assignments and things like that. So there's a lot of like, you have to talk to the people who run openreview.net or something like that, maybe with McCollum from Amherst. So that's kind of metadata, right? So going back to what Patricia was describing, like how this metadata is growing. So I guess what would you like to see? Of course, we'd like to track everything, but what do you think we are missing in the metadata? And this is a question for everybody. What do you think is missing that would be like really important to solve issues, both like negative things that are happening in science, like exaggeration and collusion of reviewers, and positive things like what maybe give more credits about data sets. I don't think we're doing a good job, for example, tracking data sets, and I think we could be doing a better job with that. So what would you like to see in the metadata space? And this is like for everybody, anybody who wants to answer.
Okay, so I'll tell you my immediate reaction, which is not possible to get, but what I would want is WhatsApp or Weibo or whatever messaging app chats between authors, because apparently that's what's being used a lot for these collusions. But more seriously, for collusions, currently even things like name disambiguation and finding conflicts and all is extremely hard. Like right now, we don't have very good tools to find the conflicts of interest. Conflicts, for example, that they had the same advisor and they were in the same lab 10 years ago. Any such conflicts of interest, if there's a way to find that will be very, very helpful. Currently, program chairs are investing huge amounts of manual time in trying to disambiguate names from DBLP or Semantic Scholar, etc., and in trying to find conflicts and so on. So if there is a very, very good automatic conflict finding tool, that will be very helpful. But at least I don't know of any yet.
Piggyback on Nia's comments, I just want to say that there's I think conflicting efforts in science community. One thing is to encourage scholars to reach out to build a broader social network, and then that makes it very hard to define arm's length, like trying to find arm's length reviewers, because then say we are all here, we know each other, and that's another link in our social network, and that also means a more challenge to finding arm's length reviewers. So that's so I think that's something the science community sort of needs to think about. And also a bit related to the previous rounds of discussion, I'm thinking, so using algorithm to help with the reviewing process, etc. But then is it too crazy to think about having some sort of cap on the number of publications every researcher can submit, or like in a year, for example? Because now I see more and more like a very large team, many authors and many publications, because we are all under pressure to publish. But as a reviewer on the other side, I also have reviewed many papers. I think they're just not ready because they're rushed, but maybe authors are under a lot of pressure. So some ways like to build tiers, for example, initial ideas, preliminary results, even though we have those mechanisms like short paper, etc. But still, I think it's a general trend that we want more. We want it faster, and that conflicts with. So that adds a lot of burden to this science community's functionality in terms of self-correction on the errors by relying on peer review. So I think it's its intrinsic conflicts.
I just wanted to touch a bit on what Nihar was saying about the challenge of finding conflicts of interest within contributors to content. I know there's a lot of efforts being made to collect identifiers and affiliation identifiers so that if someone is pulling metadata for a data set or a journal article, they can clearly see who is associated with that. But it's kind of an uphill battle, because I know publishers have spoken to us about how hesitant they are to ask for too much from their authors. That's a big problem, because they on some level recognize the importance of assigning these identifiers, but it's a lot of work to collect them and insert them and make sure they're correct, and they're very reluctant to do that.
Yeah, I'll just make a comment actually building on that. Like in one of the large conferences we are organizing, we had asked people to report their DBLP IDs. So DBLP is a website that tracks computer science papers for each author. And for a non-trivial fraction of people, we found that they had inserted a wrong DBLP ID. Like we asked them, hey, insert your DBLP ID, but they inserted somebody else's DBLP ID. Now it's like you have to manually go and check everything, which is hard, and we can't rely on authors to do this. Now, this could have been a benign mistake, or this could have been deliberate. We have no way to figure out.
I'll say in Crossref metadata, it happens a few times a year, maybe 5-6 times a year. We'll get a record in that has my ORCID ID in it, because I've used that in examples. And I think when people are asked for an ORCID, to supply an ORCID ID, they just Google for one and they find mine. Like they're not connecting the importance of what they're being asked for to like what it'll actually give them. It's just something they have to check off.
I would like to follow up on some discussion on the metadata part, because I use PubMed metadata a lot, and I understand that it's very costly to generate those metadata, and at the same time it's difficult. So like we were trying many different ways to identify observational studies, and by definition, it should be straightforward, right? But in reality, it's just messy, because there are ways to use a very specific PubMed query. And if you look at other research done that identify observational studies, some are just the recruited medical researchers to actually identify those. So we won't be able to do that because we don't have the expertise. And so we rely on the metadata like publication type, but it's pretty new and doesn't go back to many years. And we're trying machine learning, but we can only validate using like cross-validation on data that librarians marked up. And we don't really know when it goes into real effect how good it is. And I'm just wondering like why PubMed, like NIH doesn't do it by itself, since machine learning seems so powerful nowadays. But when we look at the manual data that's already in PubMed, you can see like some observational studies are also marked with clinical trials. There are like multiple tags, and there's just so many details in there that I figure unless I become a medical researcher, I have to stop at some point. So I just want to say that it's really costly, and it's extremely valuable, but it's also costly, and the reality might not be as clean as we want.
Okay, any questions from the audience? Comments, reactions, experiences? We must remember, the panelists, that this is the next generation of science researchers. So I guess one thing, like a kind of a recurrent theme that I see in the summer school, and for good reasons, of course, is this is a focus on things that perhaps are not working too well in science. So, you know, in the work that Nihar was presenting, we had like, okay, we improved the algorithm so that the worst review it's not too bad, and then we're trying to fix mismatching and things like that. So we could, I guess we could improve science by removing the bad things, but we could also improve by making science better, right? Like making the upper bound better. And the same with Bay, that she's focused on things that are not working too well in news. So so I guess I want to flip and pick up your brain, or like, what do you think are things that we could do better to optimize science? Don't think about the bad stuff, like remove the bad stuff. Like, what are the things that we're doing, but like we could do much better? So just to give you an example related to Nihar, like I think we could do a much better job by creating panels. Like you're thinking about like individual reviewers, but I think panels, sometimes a panel, let's say, of having a reviewer that is like an expert in the methods, and having a reviewer that is like an expert in like a broad picture of the review. Maybe the mean review will be the same, but I think just the variance will be much interesting for producing better science. That's just one random thought. So what are the things that we think we could be optimizing? What are the things that we're doing good and we could do better in science? And this is also for Patricia. What are the things that we could, like, I see so many new data sets. So what are the things that we could like optimize and make better?
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say that I feel like all of these questions are coming up now because there's actually been a lot of movement, at least on the metadata front. There are, I know, a lot of organizations that are working together to create new vocabularies and taxonomies that hopefully at some point will make the collection of metadata better, which will just improve everything for everyone. So I'm thinking specifically of like we're working a lot with DataCite and Force 11. I'm on a Force 11 working group to help improve software citation, and just the act of collecting citations for software. A lot of publishers don't do that, but just the fact that we're issuing best practices and this is how you do it tells people maybe we should do that, and just makes it more of kind of the mainstream, like a legitimate thing that everyone needs to recognize that there's software involved in science, and that people who write the software need to be recognized, and you need the software accessible so that you can reproduce the research. So I feel like there's like a lot of stuff fomenting right now, and a lot of these organizations are talking to each other, so it's kind of exciting. That's a good thing.
Yeah, so just to address the specific example, Daniel, you gave, like, people are looking at the kinds of things you were mentioning, like diversity of reviewers, coverage of reviewers on papers, and so on. So yes, those are great things which are good, and they are improving. But more generally, in like my biased experience and viewpoint from computer science, I think we are doing a very good job in trying to design better and better policies, and being open to to change and to do better. As just as a simple example, in many other communities, you have these for-profit journals where authors submit their taxpayer-funded research and just give it away for free to those journals. Sometimes the author will pay the journal to publish it. And then there's also this thing where the journals will ask reviewers to do free labor for them. And then the journal's parent company will make a ton of profit for its owners and shareholders. Yeah. I find that absolutely absurd as to why people would submit there, why people would review for that. It's just absurd. In computer science, or at least in machine learning, my community, like about 25 years ago, we used to have such journals. And then the entire community decided together that, hey, we'll not do that. So almost the entire editorial board of that stopped machine learning, the journal then, which was a for-profit journal, almost the entire editorial board resigned together. And then they started this new journal called the Journal of Machine Learning Research, which is free to submit, free to publish, completely open access. Yeah. So that was 25 years ago. And we don't have that problem of these for-profit journals and absurd such things here. So we have been very proactive in all of these things. Even now in machine learning, we're running a lot of experiments which are informing a lot of policies. And yes, there are debates about policies. Some people are resistant to change, but there's a lot of openness to improving it. So we are at a very good place, and we are very open to improvement and understanding the problems that are there.
I would second Nia's comments about research community can do open access in the self-sustainable way. Like the ACL anthology is the main NLP archive for all of the publications. I would like to talk a bit more about the and from language evolution perspective, so some of my research findings are suggesting that there are discussion and quote unquote negotiation in terms of how to communicate science findings in a positive way. So for example, the larger the team, the more, I would say, more careful people are considering using causal language, right? And that seems to come with more experience. Like the more paper you write, so you sort of know what's the best way to use it. And also the overall trend of like there are a lot of concerns about overstatement, like exaggeration, but we see a decreasing trend, and journals are working as gatekeepers. So these are all like good actions that we see that's happening in research community. And there's another phenomenon that I would say we started to observe, but we haven't done rigorous measurement, which is we see, for example, causal language use seems to kind of converge. So like if we count like the number of words, like indicators for causal over time, and they tend to kind of converge to a fewer number of words. So that might, and we are hypothesizing that might have something to do with like a collaboration, especially international collaboration, that might break some barrier in terms of cultural differences or like a research upbringing, and to kind of go toward some sort of norm in terms of the language that researchers use. And I think that would be, that could make it easier for like NLP tools to extract the elements from the publications for purpose, like a science of science purpose. And also I see some journals have requirements say you have to explicitly state your research questions in your introduction, and some sort of templates thing, like using standardized terms to describe your study design or statistical analysis results. I think those might be helpful too. So that, because after annotating a lot of research papers, I have to say that the writing can be all over the place. But hopefully we see a better quality and also vocabulary terminology convergence for the in a good way.
Thank you. Good to hear good positive things happening for the next generation, perhaps. So speaking of next generation, please, if you have any comments, questions, take advantage of this opportunity of having these accomplished researchers here with you. So please just ask questions away, unmute yourself, and go ahead, Han.
So I do have one question. So we have tried, like we have developed method or techniques to reduce or how to say, like fix problems in science. But after we try those things, do we have chance to look back? For example, we fixed peer review, but did you check the review? Does the review come better, or those kind of issue come? Have we done that before?
Yeah, at least in my community, there are various measurements that have been done. Once you've deployed or run some policies doing some measurements. For example, on the policy side, we have run mentoring programs for mentoring new reviewers. And then we did measurements about their review quality along many different dimensions, their engagement in the review process and so on, comparing with the conventional pool of reviewers who did not get the mentoring and so on. So these kinds of things have been done. There have also been investigations about various aspects of the review process. For example, you have discussions, type discussions, you have panels and so on. And people have tried to understand the effects of those. People have tried to understand effects of double blinding versus single blinding. For algorithms as well, people have tried that. So for example, using algorithm A versus algorithm B for the assignment, people have looked at methods or various metrics of the reviews and try to see what happened and so on. So yes, people have done it in many cases. As I said, another example is miscalibration, right? Where people tried these algorithms and they evaluated them and did not work well. And that's why I said this is still an open problem, because the algorithms are not working well. So yes, they have tried this quite a few times.
Yeah. I see. Thank you very much.
Hi, turn my microphone on. Hi, can you hear my microphone okay? Okay, thanks. I just have a question. This whole institute has been so eye-opening for me to see outside of my silo, so to speak. And I just wonder what leadership you see, what organizations you see that are helping to bring different knowledge domains together to identify problems and find solutions. Where do you see the best type of leadership in that area, or possibilities for leadership?
So maybe I can answer. Well, I'll answer the second part, best possibilities for leadership for bringing things together. Right now, at least for like research specifically on some aspects of peer review itself, across different communities, there are a few organizations, but a lot of researchers who are working in an isolated fashion in different communities. And I've happened to meet some of them and so on, and they're like, hey, there's no bridge between different communities, and there needs to be one. So there are a few organizations which are kind of doing well, like there's Metrics from Stanford, there is Rory from UK and so on. But there's a lot more possibilities for trying to get an umbrella organization that can support research, at least on peer review.
From information quality perspective, I would say like universities, for example, can do a better job training their press officers. Because we as individual researchers also have this challenge, like how do we communicate our finding to our press officers so they can write a press release for us. So if sometimes they're just like staff members repurpose themselves into this job, and they didn't get probably enough training to really do that. So if some way, some sort of training program can be set up to to teach them like the some criteria in terms of reporting science news, I think the communication quality would be improved. Because a lot of time, I think there were studies that interviewed the press officers about their dual purpose. Because on the one hand, they feel like they're journalists, they're reporting science, they're proud, and they want to be true to the content. And on the other hand, they feel like there's a need to promote the research, and there are conflicts. How do they manage that? They have those questions. So if some training programs can be provided to them, I think that would be really helpful. And the other, I think, mechanism would be discussion within the research community. So like in the ACL community, at every conference, there are business meetings, and a lot of time at those business meetings are devoted to discussion, like an open community discussion on how the review process should be done. And there are actually volunteer researchers analyzing prior data about the review, and to see like any place to improve, and people can raise comments, questions, concerns, and then collectively we figure out incrementally improve the system. So I think these are the things I see that could happen or is happening.
I have a follow-up comment to what Bay said. In business meetings as well as on social media, there are so many opinions about how to improve peer review. And I would just hope that people would read up a little more, because there is a ton of literature on peer review in various communities. And a lot of things that are suggested, they have been tried out at some places. People have done experiments and so on. And I just wish people would read a little more from them about these things, so that they could understand the challenges which have already been found out about these opinions, and then form opinions on how to address these challenges, rather than reinventing the wheel a million times.
I was just gonna mention, I know I'm more on the kind of metadata infrastructure and publishing side of things. But one of the organizations that I work with, and again, it's very publisher centric, is NISO, the National Information Standards Organization. And what they do is they create standards related to the transmission of metadata in between libraries and publishers and into the general ecosystem. And they're actually doing some interesting things. There's actually a committee to make a peer review taxonomy into a standard. They maintain the credit standard, which is the credit taxonomy, which is a list of contributor roles to research that go beyond what is normally collected and transmitted. So more about like data curation and reviewing and that sort of thing. And also I had mentioned Force 11, they do a lot of work on maintaining connections between different organizations who talk about metadata infrastructure.
Thanks for the comments.
So we have some more minutes left. So again, if you have any questions, comments,
Right. Thank you very
Oscar,
much.
go ahead.
Yeah, the pressure on researchers, I think, kind of pushed them into some kind of practices like paper mills, because they just they guarantee citations, not the publication, but even citations. They guarantee that you will get a paper with 20, 30 citations. So do you think, is there any methods to, detect them and in using machine learning, artificial intelligence like that? Thank you.
So I didn't follow the question. So detect what? Could you please clarify?
Detect, this kind of paper mills. Because they say if you pay this amount of money, we will give you a paper with a number of citations, not just the paper, but citations. I think Bayes' proposition to, the kind of capping, just limiting the number of papers and researcher can publish in a year, it would be a great, but I think it's not will be accepted. So is there any way to, to detect this kind of papers, this kind of practices? Thank you.
I think it's really hard. It's something we've discussed a lot at Crossref, because we make the point that a DOI and a Crossref membership isn't an indicator of quality. It just means that you're publishing research and assigning a DOI to it. But we have uncovered some really sketchy things, like if someone's running a paper mill, they don't actually want to pay money to join Crossref and assign DOIs. So they'll often make up fake DOIs, or they'll not actually they'll become a Crossref member and then not actually register anything. And if we uncover sketchy behavior, we can cancel someone's membership. But our current stance is that if you suspect that something's a paper mill, you should take a closer look at the DOIs and see what they're registering, and see if they're actually registering something. We've also had problems with people trying to, they'll say, okay, we'll give you a DOI for something, and then someone will have to pay them more than they're paying us and stuff. So we try to keep an eye on that kind of behavior, but there's so much, and there's such a huge churn with that. It's really hard. So.
I think there might be very domain specific solutions. So if there could be algorithm to detect a large number of papers that are very similar on similar topics, and they probably change a kind of material and redo everything. And so but that has to be specialized tools for specific areas. In general, one thing I thought about is actually whatever paper mills are trying to provide as a commodity is actually based on what reviewing criteria is for tenure, promotion, those kind of decisions. So if citation count is widely used, then they're targeting that. But if citation quality is pursued, then the game would change. So I think it's important to look at what are the rules for the game. So I had done a project before on citation opinion analysis. So basically it's in a bigger area of citation context analysis where I want to distinguish perfunctory citations to substantial citations. And so I think I see Semantic Scholar also implemented some similar functions. This is a citation about method, and I forgot what the name they use, but distinguishing substantial citations from others. If a paper is cited multiple times in another paper, then that means it's more important, or is it just mentioned at the beginning of the introduction? Right. So I think if we put quality into the criteria, and I think NLP can provide more help in that regard, then I guess paper milling will be harder. So hopefully that would discourage a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with everything that was said, and I'll also provide a comment which is not about using AI ML techniques, but just about policies. So currently in machine learning conferences, you submitted let's say somebody submitted a paper which was plagiarized from somewhere else. Can you guess what the penalty is for this? Let's say if it was a complete copy paste. Can someone guess what the penalty is for that author?
Nothing.
Nothing, or next to nothing, which is that specific paper is rejected, but that's it. Yeah. In our conferences, nobody else even knows that this person did this, and you cannot even blacklist this person. So next year, in the next edition of the conference, they might do some same thing again and again and again and again. And this is a huge problem, right? Even people have been caught in collusions. There was this really sad case which had happened in computer architecture, significantly affecting a PhD student who committed suicide because of these collusions and the advisor pressure and so on. And then, almost nothing was done. And then after a huge amount of pressure, only one name came out that, oh, this person is banned from submitting to ACM for 10 years. That's it. So this person is still free to submit elsewhere. And the other colluders, who are caught, nobody knows who they were. Okay, so they might still be active. This is a huge problem. And so we really need policies and very, very strong deterrents, high punishments and strong deterrents to deter against paper mills, collusions, any of these. Currently, we don't have that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. I think just adding up something. Yeah, the pressure creates some kind of conferences. I know Turkey is not well known for the honesty in publication, something like that. And there are lots of groups in Turkey publishes lots of journals, papers, something. And sometimes I get some, emails to join a conference, something like that. International Conference on Social Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. So it opens everything, and under the line it says it is okay for the promotion laws or something like that. So you can use that conference for promotion. So thank you very much.
Yeah, actually, there's this company here which has created so many fictitious conferences, many of which have the same name as top conferences. And then they'll just use people's names often without permission in the program committee, and then ask for submission and so on. It's crazy.
I think these kind of solicitation is now the ballpark of the content in my junk folder. So we all use filters, but the thing is, just like a spam emails or text messages, there's no penalty. So yeah.
Well, I'll actually debate that. Like this company has copied one of our top conferences. It's called ICLR, International Conference on Learning Representations. And if I search ICLR 2023 on Google, the third link it shows me is from this website. Okay, so this fake conference. That's the third link on Google. So yeah, I don't think like Google's filters and search is as good to catch these things yet.
Okay, so I guess if there are more questions, you will have the mentoring session for that. I want to thank again everybody, Patricia, Bay, Nihar, for the time and great presentations. Very exciting discussion too. So let's thank them with a round of applause.